everyone. This is the beginning of our lecture on the creation of the modern Republican Party, the origins of the new right. So, I want to start off by doing a bit of review. At the beginning of the semester, we talked about the Democratic and the Republican parties, and we talked about how they had different values than they had today. So, I want you to think back and do you remember what these differences were? Well, in the election of 1900, we can define Democrats as largely being in the South, being quite religious, and not liking big government. They really wanted the values of the state and the small government, versus the Republicans, who were largely in the North and wanted a larger federal government. So, in the beginning of this semester, when we talk about the Gilded Age and Progressive Era, these were largely the values of the Democrats and the Republicans. And we're overgeneralizing a bit because there are Democrats who are in the North, just like there are Republicans in the South. But on the whole, we can say this. But what we have to remember is there's nuance. So, for example, we have the populist movement that we talked about with the Gilded Age and Progressive Era. So, one of the leaders we talked about was William Jennings Bryan. William Jennings Bryan runs on a Democratic ticket, even though he's considered to be a populist leader. The populists were largely in the Midwest, so they go both north and south in the Midwest. They are driven by religion, like the Democrats, and they had different views on governments. In some way, they wanted more government regulation, particularly of industry, to protect the workers. But on the other hand, they valued state governments, and they would say, well, the state government values are more important than federal government values, even though they want the federal government to make sure that that the big industry isn't taken advantage of. So there's a melding of different values with the populist movement. But on the whole, we can sort of define politics and by 1900 as being Northern Republicans, Southern Democrats, Republicans liking federal government, Democrats liking state values. But this is going to start to change in the 1930s, and we hinted at this when we looked at the rise of President Roosevelt. So Franklin Delano Roosevelt, President Roosevelt, comes out of the Great Depression, and he's an anomaly because he is a Democrat from the North. Wait, what? He's a Democrat from the North? Huh? Roosevelt said, well, I identify as Democrat because he was running on ideas of, well, let's have the states work. But at the same time, Roosevelt says, well, we want the federal government to expand because of the Great Depression. So Roosevelt is saying we need to have all of these reform movements, and he's being driven by the maternalist movement. So this group of people, of women in the progressive era who are like, okay, well, it's my role as a mother to fix society. I'm going to fix society by banning alcohol. I'm going to fix society through labor reform, etc. I'm going to fix society by helping children. I'm going to fix society by expanding education. That's the maternalist movement. And Roosevelt's being influenced by these women. These are some of the biggest like if he was to talk about a hero, he'd probably list this long line of maternalist reformers. And so Roosevelt said, well, it isn't just the state government that should be responsible for this, it's also the federal government that should be responsible for this. Moreover, in response to the Great Depression, Roosevelt says, well, the federal government should help people every day. The federal government should be the ones to make sure that if you can't pay your bills, well, the federal government's going to help you with that. Federal government should be there that if you can't buy food, we should help you with that. So when Roosevelt runs for president in 1932, he's running against a guy named Herbert Hoover, who is Republican. And people don't like Herbert Hoover because the Great Depression's hit, and Herbert Hoover's like, well, the economy will figure itself out, whatever. And people are saying, well, wait a minute, I'm on the streets, I can't live. So in the election of 1932, people are given the choice. We can vote for Herbert Hoover, who's saying, let the economy figure itself out, let the market figure itself out. Or they're given the choice of Roosevelt. And Roosevelt's saying, okay, well, the government needs to help you guys out and provide for you. So on my slide, I have an image of the electoral map from the election of 1932. And what do you notice? Roosevelt wins by a landslide. So Roosevelt wins. And so he's in office and he wins the election of 36, of 40, of 44. And people at first are like, yes, woohoo, Roosevelt. We can afford to buy food. We can afford all of these little things that we were missing. We have a job, and the government's making sure we have jobs. So Roosevelt maintains his popularity through the Great Depression and then going into World War II. And this is because of his personality cult, which we talked about back in the 1930s, and actually with World War II. He uses technology brilliantly. He's able to communicate with people, and he has this level of government transparency where he's saying, hey, I'm going to tell you what's going on. But people are starting to become uncomfortable. Some people are, not everyone, but some. Some people are starting to say, so Roosevelt is saying that we should have, the government should pay for everything. Okay. But we don't like this idea. We feel that the federal government is getting too big and it's imposing values on people that the people don't like. And so people start to slowly say, well, wait a minute. Like, shouldn't we have states' rights? Isn't that a thing? Where did those go? So in the election of 1932, Roosevelt just wins by a landslide. He only loses Connecticut, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. His popularity, though, starts to slip. So in the election of 1940 and 1944, people in the Midwest start saying, yeah, we don't like what Roosevelt's doing. They say, well, the Great Depression's over. Why is this still going on? Why is the government still so big? They start saying it should be state values. The state should have more control than the federal government. And so Roosevelt, he still wins by a landslide in 40 and 44. But they're saying, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm really not comfortable with this. And so he starts to lose some popularity. Now, in addition to losing popularity because people are saying the federal government's too big, Roosevelt also does something kind of crazy. He runs for a third time and a fourth time. So today, it is actually written we've added to the Constitution saying you can only be president twice. And that had been the tradition before Roosevelt. It was the tradition. So every president, yeah, I'm going to run twice, no big deal. I'm done after 2 terms. And they're looking back to the Founding Fathers, and that's kind of what the Founding Fathers had wanted to do. Well, Roosevelt says, I'm the only one who can save us from Nazi Germany. And so he runs again in 40 and 44 because of World War II. And people are like, wait a minute. I'm seriously not comfortable with this. Like, is he creating a dynasty? Is he a new king? What's going on? And after Roosevelt dies, actually Congress passes an amendment to the Constitution saying you can only run twice. But people are just become more and more uncomfortable with Roosevelt saying, what about the states' rights? Why is the federal government so powerful? And why is it that this guy just keeps running over and over? And so people are becoming more and more uncomfortable, particularly in the Midwest. But the South is still voting Democrat. Look at my things. The South is still voting Democrat because they say, well, we vote along party lines. And so they're still going to vote Democrat, even if they're uncomfortable. And we'll see what happens.